Hi guys, it's Michelle from Full Motion Bodyworks, and I'm here to take you through a sequence that should help if you struggle with plantar fasciitis. So we're going to focus on the entire posterior chain, not just your feet, but your feet, your calves, your hamstrings, your glutes, all the way up to try and release tension from above the chain all the way down to where the problem is. Because typically where you feel the pain is not where the pain is coming from. There's usually a problem somewhere else, and the pain in the feet is the symptom that you get. So we're going to cover all our bases. Things that you need for today, we're going to do some rolling. So I'm using a lacrosse ball here. You can use a golf ball for the feet. It's a little bit more intense because it's so small. You can use a tennis ball, but it's not quite as intense because it's so soft. The lacrosse ball is the perfect, density for me. You can also use, if you've got a massage ball from somewhere else, that works just fine. If you want to skip the rolling, you sure can, but it's pretty helpful. So I've got that here. I've also got a yoga strap. You can use a belt, or a scarf works really well too. And then I've got some yoga blocks here. If they're not necessary, you can always grab a couple books. They're just to give us a little bit of leverage when we come to rolling our calves. So we're going to start by rolling our feet. So you're going to start off with the ball, and I will sit just to show you kind of where we're going, because as I stand, you won't be able to see. So we're going to work from the heel all the way up to the toes, and you want to break your feet kind of into three sections: the outer section, the center, and the middle. So you're going to work through each section. So roll from heel to toe on the outside, the middle, and the center. So we're going to hop on up. Just place the ball down, start on the heel, and let the ball just sink into the tissue. It kind of helps if you breathe through it, so take a nice deep breath, exhale, let the ball sink in, and then you're just gonna roll nice and slow. If you get lots of cracks throughout your ankles, that's totally normal and usually a good sign. You can even get a little calf stretch at the end by just letting your heel drop all the way down before you start again. So just letting that tissue sink into the ball and roll. Now this is something to do every day, especially if you really struggle with your feet. It's great to do first thing in the morning before you get out of bed, just to loosen that tissue up before you take those first steps. If you're feeling like those first few steps out of bed are super stiff, it also helps to do right before you go to bed so that it doesn't stiffen up so much throughout the night. If you're someone who likes to run, I would roll your feet every single day right before you run, just to get that blood flow going and get that tissue to be a little bit supple. And take your time here. You could spend as little time or as much time as you want rolling the feet. For the sake of this video, we're not going to be here too long, but know that you can pause it, spend a little bit more time there if you feel like you need it. And honestly, most people do. So that's fine. If you don't have a ball, you don't want to do any rolling, you can fast forward through it. If you find the rolling to be super intense and painful, it might just be too much. So kind of skip through this part and come back to it as you get more flexibility, as the tension kind of releases. So we're going to switch legs now. Switch your foot. And again, just let the tissue kind of sink in, and then start your rolling. Nice and slow. The slower the better, because you want that ball to push into the tissue and find those little pockets of tissue that are not getting enough blood flow, and that's what brings it in. It's almost like getting a massage. The massage therapist is kind of digging in to try and bring blood flow into those pockets. That's exactly what we're doing here to yourself. So just push down and roll. Nice and slow. Take your time. You might find one side is really tender and painful and the other one feels fine. If that's the case, go back to the side that's more tender and spend more time there. You don't have to roll just for the sake of rolling. If your one leg feels fine, you're like, this doesn't bother me at all, do it for maybe a minute or two, go back to the one that's really bothering you. We'll spend maybe just 30 seconds more here, rolling out. Nothing will tell you need a pedicure more than working on your feet. It's time. This is your PSA. It's time to get a pedicure. It's time for me to get one anyway. Perfect. We're going to come on down. Now that we've rolled them out really good, we're going to stretch the bottom of the feet. So you're going to start on your knees. Come forward, and you're just going to flip your toes down so that the balls of your feet, the ball of your each foot and your toe pads are down on the ground, and then you're gonna sit back on your haunches. So your foot is stretched out here, and we're just gonna take some nice deep breaths. If you don't really have foot issues, which you probably do if you're watching this video, you might not feel much, or you might feel it more in the ankles or the calves. So that's also a good indicator if it's not really bothering your feet, but it's bothering your calves or your ankles. That's a good indicator that the problem is coming from further up the chain and not actually your feet. If this is really intense on your feet, you need to stay here longer and just take some nice deep breaths. Kind of work this into your routine. Some people will find they don't feel anything here. Some people it will be super intense. Just depends on your foot problems. If it's too intense, give yourself lots of breaks. Just take your time. If you want a little bit more intensity, you can actually pop your knees up. So you're kind of in like a really low squatted position here. So your knees are straight out. You're putting a lot of pressure here, getting a nice bend and stretch into those feet. And just take some nice deep breaths here. Nice and easy. And again, if this feels really intense, you probably want to spend more time here. If this feels too intense, drop your knees back down to the floor and just start slow. If you want to kind of up the ante a little bit, you can even walk, do a little duck walk. So take a step, and as you drop this back knee down to the floor, you'll get a really deep stretch into that foot. Swing it around, and you're going same thing opposite side, and walk, walk, walk. You can try that if you want to kind of get into a little bit more advanced mobility, or you can stay here, whatever feels good for you. We're gonna do a couple more deep breaths. If you want, you can do a few more steps with your walking. Good, and then we're gonna drop the knees down, flip the feet down, so the pads of your feet are up now, not touching the mat. You're gonna just take one knee, pull it up towards the ceiling, and then just kind of shift back and forth to try and get into the front of the foot and where it connects to the ankle there. If you're really not feeling anything, sometimes you get better leverage. If you're standing, you can use a wall to hang onto if you need to, but flip that foot down, kind of get into a squat and rotate that way. So see what feels better for you. It might feel deeper for you if you stand up. If you're really tight, you might be feeling it down here, and that's just fine. Do what works for you. We'll take a couple deep breaths here. And then we're gonna switch. Other side. Trying to open up the front of that ankle where it connects to the foot. That tissue in there is really delicate, and it can get really, really tight. So again, if you need to stand up, you can kind of stand, shift, squat low, try and get into the front there. Wherever you feel it the most, that's where you want to be. Perfect. One more deep breath. And drop it down. We're going to come to sit. And we're going to work on the ankles next. So hands just go behind you for support. Bring one foot up and over the other, and you're going to make the ABCs with your big toe. So draw A, B, C, D all the way down to Z, moving your foot in every direction. And I want you to notice how your ankle feels as you do this. Do you have good mobility? Is there one sticky spot? Does it click when you go in a certain direction? Just pay attention to that, because it'll tell you again if maybe your foot pain is coming from your ankles or maybe a little bit further up the chain. A lot of us have stiff ankles and just don't deal with it. If you've ever sprained an ankle and didn't care for it properly, that can cause a lot of issues both in your feet and your hips. So we'll just kind of finish out here, and then we're just gonna switch legs. So other foot's up and over, and you're drawing the ABCs with that foot. Nice big letters. Don't make them small. Don't be stingy. Nice big letters. You can spell your name if you want or whatever. It doesn't matter. We're just trying to get as much mobility into that ankle, moving in every direction. This is a good one to do every day. If you have stiff ankles, just try and keep them moving. If you do sprain your ankle, the best thing you can do is try and move it right away before it stiffens up, before that tendon loses blood flow. Sit down, do the ABCs as quick as you can to try and get it moving before it stiffens up. Good. We're gonna get right into the calves while we're down here. So I'm gonna take a yoga block. If you've got a stack of books at home, I would recommend using that. You can just do the rolling on the floor, but I find you can get in a little bit deeper if you elevate your leg. So it doesn't matter what you're using, place the ball on top of that, and you're going to start with the ball right in the meaty part of your calf, and you're just going to roll. So again, depending on what issues you have going on, you might feel nothing here, or it might be really intense, but I do find you get a better, deeper leverage if you elevate that leg. And it's just a little bit easier than trying to do it on the floor, though you sure can. So some nice deep breaths. This is always a super tight area for me. I am a runner, even though I haven't run in a long time. I am chasing around a toddler, so they're still tight. Nice deep breaths as you work through here. And it's important to note that the no pain, no gain mentality isn't always the best. So if it's really painful and like you're having a hard time breathing through it, just back off. Use a little bit less leverage. Don't push your leg down as hard. Just go to your tolerance, because we want to tell your nervous system it's okay to do this. Otherwise, it'll have the opposite effect. And then I'm just going to scoot back, move the ball down a little, and get closer down towards the Achilles here. And roll. Some people will find this really tender. Some people will find it not as bad as it was higher up. So spend time where you feel it the most and where you feel it needs the most attention. That's where you want to be. You don't have to follow exactly what I do or the exact amount of time. This is for you and working on what you have going on. I'm going to go ahead and switch legs. Again, if you have just issues with just one side, you can use this time to just work on that side. Although I usually find if you have an issue on one side, sometimes it's coming from the other side, or the other side is suffering because it's compensating for the side that's struggling. So keep that in mind. For me, this side is really intense compared to the other side. Not really sure why. You can also flex and straighten your foot. If you find that digging into the ball is a little bit too intense, you can kind of rest it lightly and then stretch and flex that way. Sometimes it'll kind of warm up the area and just let you sink in nice and slow if you do it that way. Go all throughout your calf. Find those sticky, painful spots, because that's really, the painful spots are what need the most attention. So nice deep breaths there. Just don't get too carried away and do too much. So again, I'm going to kind of back up and see for me how my Achilles are doing down here. Spend a little time there. And you know what, mine are not that bad, but it was really tight higher up, so I'm going to go back there. You do what feels good for you. If you need some more attention on the Achilles, do that. Or work your way up. If the other leg was tighter, you can go back to the other leg. Do what you need, whatever works for you. Ooh, this is tight for me. I could probably spend a lot more time here, but for the sake of the video, we're gonna move on. But just remember, if you're really getting somewhere, like you're feeling some good release, if you're feeling a lot of warmth, like you're feeling blood flow come in, keep going, use this momentum, hit pause, take some time to really get into the nitty-gritty of it, because that's a good sign. Otherwise, we're gonna set the block and the ball off to the side, and now we're gonna get into some hamstring stretching and calf stretching. So we're gonna do a little bit of down dog, but keep in mind this isn't yoga, so I'm not too concerned about your technique and how perfect your down dog looks. We're just trying to get into the posterior chain. So start on your hands and knees. You're gonna come up briefly into a plank, and then lift the hips up, bring the heels down towards the floor, and then just pedal them out. So straighten one leg, bend the other. Take a deep breath there, and switch. I will say it helps if you push out of your shoulders so you're not sagging in here. Push out, and that will typically help you to be able to stretch here a little bit longer. If you have issues with your head upside down, you can always do calf stretch against the wall, standing. So just going here, you can always try that, bend and straighten if that works for you. I find you get a much deeper stretch doing it this way, but listen to your body. If you've got major shoulder issues, this might not work for you. Do what feels good. And to get more into the Achilles, you're gonna bend both knees and then shift your heels back even further. Hips and heels go, hips go up, heels go down even further, working more into that Achilles area. From here you can bend and straighten. We'll do one more deep breath here. And then we're gonna come on down, bring your knees down. We're going to briefly touch on the hamstrings because I find sometimes the hamstrings, though they're tight, they are tight because something else is tight, like your hip flexors. So as a reaction to your hip flexors being shortened, your hamstrings shorten to kind of match. So I don't like to overdo it on the hamstrings because typically they are tight because of something else, but I do want to touch on them slightly. So if you didn't feel them when we did down dog, now's your time. I'm going to grab onto my strap. You can just use your hand too. I find the strap really helps. So you're going to lay down on your back and you're going to wrap the strap around one leg underneath the knee here. Now the opposite leg, you can either keep the knee bent if your hamstrings are really tight, or you can straighten that leg out on the floor. If your hip flexors are tight, you might find that you will cheat a little bit. Like when you lift this leg up, the opposite hip will start to rise. So then you want to bend that knee, okay? So the strap is underneath this leg, under the knee. Pull it up towards the ceiling into your chest. And then I want you to bounce that foot a few times because we're kind of going to we're going to be playing really close to the sciatic nerve, and we want this area to be neurologically down regulated. So sometimes the bouncing of the foot beforehand helps relax. And then you're going to picture your foot as a kite, and you're just going to fly your kite up towards the ceiling. So what's important here is not how much extension you get. I don't care if you can straighten your leg all the way or not. A little bit of bend is totally fine. And I want you to relax your foot to start with. Because again, when you flex your foot, sometimes you start to get into that sciatic nerve and it's a little bit too much. So just relax it and keep that knee a little bit bent to stay out of the nerve. And you can just use the strap to pull that knee as close to you as you comfortably can. So now because my hip flexors are tight, my opposite hip is starting to come up off the floor. So I'm going to bend this knee so that I'm not cheating. And then I'm just going to make nice big circles with this leg. So this is just gentle hamstring work, because sometimes I find if you just stretch and stretch and stretch them and they're weak, you're really not doing yourself any favors. So we're not going to go too deep in here. So just some nice little circles, and then you can just drop that leg out to the side. You can use your hand to support it if you need to. Just go as far down as you feel comfortable. From here, you can bend the knee if that feels better, or straighten it. You can also drop the other knee away to really get into the adductors if those feel tight. Do what feels good for you. We're just going to be here briefly. Then you're going to bring that leg back to center. Now, if you have sciatic issues, it may be uncomfortable to cross the midline, so you want to kind of stay where you are and just continue circling. If you don't have any sciatic issues, go ahead and cross that midline, and from here you can kind of point and flex, do a gentle little nerve floss. Nice and easy. You can still circle around if that feels good. You can straighten this bottom leg here if you want, keep it up bent, whatever feels good for you. You can bring this leg over if that feels okay in your back, towards the floor. You do what feels best for you. If it gets tingly, any tingling, numbness, pain, you want to go back across the midline. You don't want to be over here on the safe side. We don't want to make the sciatic nerve angry. That's not the goal here. That's for another video on addressing sciatic nerves. And we'll come back to the center. You can point and flex your toe here, circle the foot, and then you're just going to let that foot drop, bounce a little bit. Bring both knees into squeeze, and then you're just going to switch the strap to the other leg, underneath the knee, So again, opposite leg, you can drop the foot so you have a bent knee, or you can do straight leg out if you're not too tight in your hamstrings. So start by bouncing this foot to down regulate that nervous system, get out of the sciatic nerve. And then you're going to bring that leg up towards the ceiling into the chest. Fly your kite up towards the ceiling, and then some nice circles. So you might find one leg is much tighter than the other, and that's okay. And again, the important part here is not how much extension you can be in. It's okay to bend the knee, and it's actually sometimes better because you stay a little bit out of that sciatic nerve range. So extension does not matter here. Nice big circles. I'm going to bend my knee because my hip's coming up a little bit. My hip flexors are really tight. And I'm going to drop this leg out to the side. So again, you can bend and straighten. Do what feels good. You can drop the opposite leg so that you're getting into the adductors. Nice little stretch through there. We're not going to stay here too long. Come back up. Again, if you have sciatic issues, you probably want to stay here. If you don't, go ahead and cross that midline and point and flex. If you're having numbness or tingling, stay in the safe zone. Don't come across. You don't want to make the sciatic nerve angry, especially if it's really flared up for you. This is not the goal. And we'll come back to the middle, point and flex. Make little circles with your foot. Maybe pull in a little bit closer, and then go ahead and bounce that foot. Hug your knees in, and bring your feet back down to the floor. So now we're gonna get into the glutes. I'm gonna move a little bit here so you can see. We're going to get into a figure 4. If you've done any of my other videos, you kind of know where this is going. So you're gonna bring one leg up and over the other, so you've got a nice figure 4, but we're going to add in the lacrosse ball. So grab your ball, and you're going to tuck the ball under the glute of the leg that is up. So up and over here, you're gonna tuck this right under here. Now, if you have access to like a chair or a coffee table, sometimes it's really nice to rest this leg on the coffee table so your figure 4 is actually up further, and then you can stick the ball there. You might get into some different spots, get a little bit better leverage. Do what feels good for you. I'm just going to start here for now, and I might lift up using, you can also use a strap if you don't have a table nearby, or you can use your hands, doesn't really matter. So we're going to roll a little bit, and I'm just rocking onto the ball and off of the ball. So just off and on here. Again, if you're getting like tingly, numb, you might be kind of playing in sciatic nerve territory because it runs down through your piriformis, through, underneath, on top, depending on how your body is situated. So we don't want to make it angry, don't want to inflame it. It's not the goal. And then you can kind of move it out this way, more on your outer hip. You can move it up, move it around, see where it feels good, and just focus on rocking in and out here. And if you want to really get into the rolling, again, you can kind of lift your figure 4 up and rock in and out. It might get in a little bit deeper. You can rest this foot on a chair. That's always really helpful to kind of dig in. So again, I'm not going to keep you guys here too long for the sake of the video, but if you're really getting somewhere, hit pause and keep rolling here. I'm going to go ahead and switch to the other side. So I'm going to start with this foot down and tuck this ball right under that glute area. You don't want to be on your sacrum, so you don't want to be on the bone. You want to make sure you're on the muscle, the squishiness. The squishy is important. Rolling your sacral bone, not going to help you. Probably not going to feel great. For me, this side is way tighter than the other side, so my rocking is a little bit smaller. I'm going to spend a little bit more time letting it sink into the tissue here, taking some deep breaths, and then coming out. Switch the ball around. So again, you might find one side is really painful or intense and the other side's not. Go to the side that feels more intense, spend a little bit more time there. So why are we working on our glutes for plantar fasciitis? A lot of times what will happen is your glute med, so one of them, your external rotators of the hip, I guess, they get really, really tight or weak or both, and they kind of don't do their job properly. So when you're doing things like exercising and you're doing a move where you need a lot of stability, like a one-legged Romanian deadlift or anything single leg, or running or whatever, instead of activating through the hips, you're activating your feet. You'll see it a lot in balance moves when I have people do like a one leg RDL, for example, and they're saying like, oh, my foot is cramping, the foot that they're standing on, like the bottom of my foot is cramping. That is a sign that your glutes are not doing their job, because the bottom of your foot is trying to grip to stabilize you. So that ends up snowballing, and that's where the plantar fasciitis comes in. So glute mobility is super important, and glute strength is super important in assessing plantar fasciitis and helping to treat it. You always got to look at the glutes when it comes to plantar fasciitis, because a lot of times they're very interconnected. Not always, but I see it more often than not. So we're going to take a couple more deep breaths here. Again, stay here as long as you need, just to really get into the glutes. And then we're just going to take that ball out. And since we're here, we're going to get right into the glute stretching. So again, if you want to use the strap, you can always use your hands. If you've got the chair, do that. But you're going to lift that knee up to the ceiling, into the chest, and then just rock side to side. Nice and easy. You can adjust this foot up or down depending on how you feel here, and just let your glutes open up. And I'm going to go ahead and switch legs. Other leg comes up and over, and rock side to side. Nice glute stretch. And again, you can stay here longer if you like. Just depends on how much time you have and how you're doing. If you're really starting to get somewhere and feel like things are happening, dig in deeper. Good, and we're just gonna roll to our side to come up. And I'm going to show you one other way to stretch your glutes. It works for some people, it doesn't for others. So if you have knee issues, I would probably stick with the figure 4 on your back. It's a little bit gentler on the knee. Otherwise, we're going to get into a little bit of a pigeon pose. Again, this isn't yoga, so I'm not super picky, but you're going to make that front leg into a bit of a triangle. Back leg swings around here, so you're nice and tall. You can always put a block underneath your bum here if you need to. You can move this foot out or in as needed, depending on if you're feeling pinchy in the hip. So I'm just going to move sideways here to show you for a moment how we're kind of looking here. Now you can stay here if you're tight. If you feel called to do it, you can come down onto your forearms to get a deeper stretch. But what I want to focus on is getting all 3 fans of the glute. So you're going to start by kind of dropping down over that knee. You can just walk your hands over it if you're too tight to drop to your forearms. So start over the knee, take a deep breath there, and then you're just going to shimmy to go over the shin, and take a deep breath there. Notice how it changes a little bit of the stretch, and we're going to shimmy one more time, more towards the foot. And take a deep breath here. Perfect, and then we're just going to switch legs. So again, you can always stay here longer if you've got the time to devote to it. If it feels really good, stay there, get a deeper stretch. Otherwise, we're going to start over the knee. Take a deep breath there. And then we're going to go over the shin. Take a nice deep breath there. Notice how it changes the stretch just a little bit. So we're hitting all 3 fans of the glute. And last time here, we're going to go more towards the foot. This is typically where people will feel tighter because we're kind of more into the external rotators of the hip when we go this direction. Deep breath. Good, come on up and come around to sit. I like to end after you do any glutes or hip stretching with some windshield wipers. So just drop both knees to one side and the other side. And there you go, about 30 minutes for plantar fasciitis, hitting the entire posterior chain from the bottom up, stopping in the low back. I hope this is helpful to you guys, and I hope you guys check out my YouTube channel where I have lots of other videos for mobility and stretching.